Welcome to Beat the Bank, the podcast that unpacks how Kiwis actually build wealth. Because for most people, leaving money sitting in the bank isn't enough anymore. If you want to grow real wealth, you need to understand how to make your money work harder through investing, business, and smarter financial decisions. Each fortnight, we sit down with investors, founders, and financial experts to unpack the strategies, lessons, and opportunities behind building real wealth. Proudly brought to you by Venture, helping Kiwis build long-term wealth. Quick disclaimer, this is for general information only, not financial advice. Please speak to a qualified advisor before making any investment decisions. Today's guest is Sarah Wrait, founder and director of Azure Property. Sarah spent her career managing commercial property, leading major projects and helping turn around challenging assets across New Zealand. Today we're exploring why creating long-term property wealth isn't just about buying the right building, it's about what happens after you own it. Enjoy the episode. Thanks for coming on Beat the Bank podcast today, Sarah.
Thanks, Ben, for having me.
Most people think property investing is all about making sure that you enter at the right time or buy it at the right time, but a lot of the value is actually created after the fact by managing the property.
Correct. Picking the cycle and when to start with commercial property is a different beast to that of residential property. Commercial property is a long-term game. So often for landlords who are beginning or even landlords who already have buildings, the hardest part for all of our clients has been to start. They've all said the first property was their hardest property and building from there seemed to be easier because they had a property they could work with.
And so once the property has been purchased by the landlord and then you come in and help them manage it, what kind of value do you add to the property, if any?
So the value we add to the property is probably around the expertise. For us, we are professional commercial property managers. This is what we do. We don't have an agency side to our business. We dedicate our 40 hours a week for all of our staff just to commercial property management. That means that you can pull all of our experience together. There's obviously 50 years plus experience with our team. And that gives a whole lot of insight to a whole lot of different properties that we've touched over the years. For a lot of landlords, they only have experience with the one building that they've been involved with or the buildings that they've been involved with. But when you add all the experience together, it's thousands of buildings that we've managed. And the value that we add is that lens and that experience. And when we walk through a building, we can see what potential issues might be current or what might be coming up. And that's the value of experience. It's not something you can learn in a book.
So I had a client who owned a industrial unit in Christchurch and was rented out to quite a large academy for 20-25 years. And for that whole time, he just managed himself with a partner. And I do wonder if he did have a professional manager looking after it for him, how much extra value could have been created.
Mm-hmm. So DIY managers, that's what we call them when they manage their buildings themselves, can often fall into a couple of different traps. One is that they're DIY managing that one building, which means it's not like they've got a portfolio that they can see and test the market on, that kind of thing. They might not be getting the cost efficiencies, for example, with insurance or with maintenance. They probably have the same guys repair things and that kind of thing, which is great. They've probably got a good relationship with the building and good knowledge of the building. But a 25-year lease with a DIY manager, you can fall into a really easy trap, two easy traps. One, some of the things, the basic things, basic administration things probably wouldn't have been done, I suspect. They wouldn't have documented rights of renewal, deeds of renewal. They might not have done proper market rent reviews. A lot of things have probably been done on a gentleman's handshake. So when it comes to selling at the end, they're scrambling together to try and find all these little bits of paper and an email here and an email there to kind of bundle everything up to sell the building. When you have a commercial manager, the basics are done really well. The rent review letters are written, the deeds of renewal are done, the market assessments, the valuations are completed. It sounds basic and sounds like sucking eggs, but at the end of the day, when you actually want to come and sell your buildings, which most clients will at some point, you want to have everything in a nice file to hand to an agent to go, this is what you need, away you go. A couple of new things that would have come in over those last 20 to 25 years or so is the whole health and safety and compliance, things like that. DIY managers often go, yeah, okay, I'll do that maybe. But when you're working with a professional, it becomes a industry standard. And for us, we're always striving for best practice. So when it, again, comes to the sale of the building, it will be markedly different. The building itself will be marketed different too, because instead of it being, oh, I woulda, shoulda, coulda done some maintenance, you would have guaranteed during that tenure that maintenance would have been done. But the biggest trap is, oh, hey, they've been in here for 20 years, they're a mate of mine now, oh, I just won't increase the rent that much. You times that out over 20 years and suddenly you get a market rental assessment 20 years later, you would have lost a lot of money over that period of time.
Also, I think, we find that a lot of our investment clients, one of the big reasons they want to work with us as their advisor is because they want to focus on what they're really good at, right? And generating income, whether they're a doctor, whether they're a lawyer, whatever it is, and they just want to pass it on to us so they can keep growing their wealth and then having us grow that part. I feel like it's quite similar in this regard as well, right? Because if you're the landlord and then all those things that you just named, maintenance guy, accountant guy, whatever. So from your point of view, what's kind of the differences between those kind of self-managed and these other clients that you work with? What's the difference in the mindset, do you think?
The mindset's quite different. All of our clients normally come from professional services, or they've been entrepreneurial, run their own businesses. They want a professional manager. They understand the impact that a professional manager will bring to their portfolio, but also they want to be hands-off. They want to do what they want to do, which is most of the time running businesses, their own businesses, or doing whatever they want to do with their own time. They don't want to be getting the calls in the middle of the night about a break-in or, God forbid, a ram raid. And they don't want to be dealing with weather events. They also probably don't have the network. Yes, they might have some friends who are contractors, but they don't have that network of, if something really goes wrong, who can I pick up the phone and make sure something is sorted today?
So for our members of the audience that currently have commercial property and maybe have a lot of it and are working with places like Azure, and they're thinking, how can we transfer these assets down to our future generations? How should they think about doing that, or is it the wrong way of going about it?
No, that is such a good question, because most of our clients have worked really hard to get their buildings, and the last thing they want to see is when they depart the world, that all of a sudden their children are fire selling their assets because they want to cash in, or they've got no experience with commercial property. So intergenerational wealth is a big component in commercial property. All of our clients that we work with want to hand their buildings down to their children. The difference is as I mentioned, most of our clients have never worked in commercial property. They've often not been real estate agents, valuers, builders, whatever it is in the profession. Most of them have come from something different to that. And that means that a lot of the children haven't worked in commercial property either. Some have, but also some don't want to be managing their buildings as well. So it's really important, we find, for our clients, is that the depth of those discussions around what they want to achieve out of their commercial buildings and what they want to pass down to their children, and actually do that coaching with the children earlier on, bring them into the piece, get them to meet the managers, get them to be involved in the buildings, see the buildings, touch the buildings, understand how they all work, and understand the setup is actually really important, because when that transfer happens, you don't want the children to feel stressed because it's already probably happened due to a stressful event for the family, but the children need to know that everything's just going to tick along, that they'll be looked after, the buildings will be looked after, and it'll be as seamless as possible. And that's really important. Because commercial property is a long-term investment strategy, you don't want to fire sell just because you don't know about how commercial property works, or just because you're feeling stressed about something that's happening at home. That's why you have a manager to handle all the ups and downs.
Yeah, so I guess on that, that's a big topic at the moment, intergenerational wealth transfer. And it's difficult for the parents because, some of them have grown up with their parents who are very quiet on the subject, right?
Yes.
And it wasn't really a discussed, you didn't discuss your assets or how much money you had with your kids. Whereas today I feel like that needs to change a lot, because as we've seen in the past, there's that rule that by the time it gets down to the third generation, pretty much all the money's gone. And that happens because the wealth just keeps getting split and split and split and split. And by the time it gets to the third generation, it's split maybe 18 ways, and, that $2 million is now not looking like $2 million anymore. It's looking like a mortgage-free house. So, You're absolutely right. I think there needs to be more conversations with the children, bringing them into these trusted advisors, as you say, and making sure that they're aware of the commercial property. But also, on the other flip side of the coin, maybe the parents need to be more aware of what the children actually want to do with that wealth as well. Maybe they want to go in a different direction. So maybe the passing down is not the asset, or maybe it is partially the asset, but also it's the knowledge on how to grow.
I think it's 100% how you've got most people are inheriting an existing portfolio. That being said, not a single one of our clients inherited a portfolio. Our clients are the ones that created the portfolio. It'll be their children that are inheriting the portfolio, or grandchildren they're inheriting the portfolio. Intergenerational wealth is a very significant topic in commercial property because a lot of our clients have worked really hard to have their commercial properties, want to make sure that those are retained by their children. And you can't split a commercial property 6 or 7 different ways and provide one chunk to one person and one chunk to another person. They have to be managed as a whole.
Yeah, from my own experience, I've seen it handled so many different ways, like one of the ways is from the point of view of the person receiving the inheritance, all of a sudden they get a call from the dad saying, hey, we're going to start paying you $50,000 a year out of the trust. And you're like, what trust? Didn't even know you had a trust. And then they just start receiving that, and then the money's coming in, and then they talk to me, and then obviously we invest it well. But I can imagine if they didn't have an advisor, where that money would go. So that's one way I've seen it. Another way, a really good way, is actually I've seen children as young as 10, 11 come and sit on whenever I go and do my half-yearly or yearly review with the parents, and the child would just sit there and listen in, And they come in quite frequently, and, some clients I've had for a decade, and I've just watched these kids grow up, and they just listen in. Must be incredibly boring for them, but at least they learn from the get-go. And then the children start actually getting excited about investing. And then we set up like a little investment account for them as well. And so I feel that's kind of the best way to go about it.
So much of this journey is around coaching people. And that's basically what you're saying. When you've got the 11-year-olds coming to the table and that kind of thing, you're taking them on the journey. And that's the hardest part. And for example, most of our clients haven't had commercial property until they've brought it. And someone somewhere along the way has said, that's a really good idea, go buy a commercial property building. And off they trotted and went and bought a commercial building. And then they've gone, now what? We've got one. It makes me think about one of our clients who, when I caught up with them, and they've been a client since Azure started. And one of the clients said over coffee, the hardest part was just starting. The hardest part was that first building. And when I brought that first building, I went, now what? And we only had 2 ways we could go. Sell it because it just felt too large, or double down and buy more. And they were so aggressive. They doubled down and brought more. And now they've got a large portfolio, 10 to 14 commercial buildings, just in Auckland. And they span their portfolio out nationwide. They've probably got over 20-something commercial buildings throughout New Zealand. But the way they view it is the hardest part was starting. The hardest part was having that conversation. Now they have children, and the children are aware about the commercial buildings, but the children don't want to have anything to do with the commercial buildings long term. So the client has expressly told us what they want to achieve. Their lawyers are aware, but they want what they want to have done with the buildings, and their wishes are understood by, as you said, their trusted advisors. And that's the most important part, is that everybody's on the same page, because that's when the wheels can fall off quite dramatically as well. You get one person involved who goes, I want to sell, another person involved who goes, I want to hold on, and then you've got a mess that you have to figure out what you're going to do with.
Yeah.
But starting the journey, starting the process, and starting that coaching about what commercial property is, or what investing is, and what that looks like as a family is actually the hardest part.
I've seen a big switch from people wanting to own residential property to wanting to own commercial property.
Yeah, I can understand that switch.
So if you had an investor out there right now who owns 10 residential properties, what would be the reason they sell those all and move to 10 commercial properties? Well, probably couldn't afford 10 commercial properties with 10 residential, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Yeah. Just because they're both called property, that is where the comparisons start and comparisons stop. They are so different. One of the biggest differences is the documentation around it. You've got a Residential Tenancies Act, you've got a deed of lease in commercial. If you have an issue in residential property, you go to the Tenancy Tribunal. If you have an issue in commercial and it goes really, really bad, you're in the High Court. So they are just not comparable. You may get a fixed term lease in residential, and you might get a year. You might get a 6-year lease in commercial. Even the structure of who pays what under each of the leases is really different. Under residential, the landlord fronts most of the maintenance for the buildings. Under commercial, it's the opposite. One's typically seen more as a short-term game, trying to chase cap rates and things like that. That's residential. Commercial, totally different game. Long-term hold, investment strategy, cash flow, just quite different. That being said, most of our clients have a little bit of both. I think I mentioned to you before, most of our clients sit there going, we've got this many commercial buildings, this many residential, we've got this much in syndicate, we've got this much in with our investor as well, investment advisor, and they are diversified across their bundle of investments that they've got.
Yep.
They're not inherently weighted in any one area. That can even be the same in their portfolio of commercial buildings too. Some of our clients are really specific about where they want to invest in the kind of buildings that they want. And some want to be as completely diversified as possible. And so there's a couple of different approaches there as well.
Yeah.
But chalk and cheese.
Yeah, so to bring it back to kind of like from an investment point of view, when we assess an asset, it's typically we just look at the risk and the return, right? That's the two places we start.
Yep.
So for residential, typically in Auckland at least, the yield, which is the cash flow you receive when compared to the price of the house or the asset, is around like 4.5, right? If you're lucky, maybe 4. What's that like in the commercial world?
It differs. It really differs compared to what type of asset you've got. In commercial, you've got so many different asset types. You've got, industrial buildings, offices, you've got retail, you've got mixed use, you've got multi-tenanted, you've got freehold, you've got body corporates. The diversity is huge. You've got some commercial buildings, cost you $1 million to get into them, for example. And some go up to 20, 30, 40, 50 million. And so the cap rates are all different and they're also different nationwide in terms of where you buy, whether you buy in a prominent city or whether you buy on the periphery in a more fluctuating market. So the cap rate discussion is actually a really hard one. You do get general rules of thumb, but they change. It used to be you have your strongholds of where your commercial properties are based, but those change. So when you assess a cap rate, I can't sit here and say that you will get this return on your building because that's not going to be realised until you actually sell it. So what we look at now could be vastly different in a couple of years' time.
But generally, on average, it's higher than residential, right?
Yep.
Usually around 7%.
On average, it's higher.
Because with residential, most of the time, after you take into consideration all the rates and insurance and property management, you're looking at a much lower yield. And so people over the history of investing in residential property have been banking on the fact that it's going to be going up in value.
Correct.
Capital gain,
yep,
right?
100%.
And that's disappeared a little bit over the last 5 years. Who knows whether that's going to be the same going forward. And so I would say that's been probably one of the main drivers to commercial property.
I also think just the change in what a landlord has to do is also a big driver too. So everything you mentioned then, rates, insurance, management fees, all of that stuff, most of our tenants are paying that on their buildings in commercial. So it's a very different beast. 10, 15 years ago, you could buy a building, a good residential house, for example, maybe not in a particularly A-grade location, but you can buy a brand new house, and I know from experience, you could buy a house for $500,000. That same house now is worth $1 million, and it's probably more run down. And the area is probably not quite as good as what it was. The difference with commercial is what you bought then has probably gone up in value now. And the other thing is you've probably had a good tenant in there who's been maintaining the building too.
Yeah.
So, and again, I do remember this quote from a leading commercial property manager that I saw when I just set up Azure, which was the best form of a passive investment is buying a commercial property and getting a full-time manager in it to look after it for you, if that's what you're after. Look, you get more peaks and troughs in residential as well. The peaks and troughs aren't as high in commercial. Yeah. So a lot of people are chasing the sale in residential.
And what's the biggest misconception about commercial property?
The biggest misconception about commercial property is the fact that all of our landlords are these big fat cats sitting on these massive piles of money, and that they don't have a soul and they don't actually care about their tenants. When actually, it's quite the opposite. Most of our actually, the large majority of our clients are all self-made, and they've worked extremely hard to invest in the commercial properties that they have, and they care very deeply about their tenants and their tenants' businesses. So it's quite a different perception. So commercial property landlords get beaten about in the media quite a bit, that they don't care, and how about the tenants, and how about this? Well, my counter to that was like, how about the landlord that's just worked 40 years to put the deposit in for their commercial building, and they're working really hard, and they're trying to create intergenerational wealth for their families, and they're trying to do the right thing. What about those landlords? Yes, we do have some really, really large landlords who have a significant holding and a significant part of the market, but most commercial landlords aren't like that. Yeah.
All right, Sarah, thanks for coming on Beat the Bank today. I've got one last question to help our audience beat the bank. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's trying to build long-term wealth through commercial property or management?
Get started. The hardest thing is starting. Whatever commercial property you can get in first, get into it and build from there.
Yeah. I think that's exactly the same in our world as well. I think it's the same for most things in life. You just got to get started, because then you start getting more familiar with it, get more excited about seeing the returns of it or not the returns of it,
Yep.
which teaches you a lot of lessons.
Yes.
And that helps you to, continue investing or continue buying more property or continue doing whatever it is that you're doing.
And getting the right support, getting the right trusted advisors, that's key as well, because you want to have the right people sitting in your pockets to help you make some of those decisions when things go wrong, because it can go wrong. You want people there with the experience, with your best interests at heart, to make sure that your journey is as smooth as possible.
All right. Thanks for coming on Beat the Bank, Sarah.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for watching another episode of Beat the Bank. If you want help building long-term wealth and getting your money working harder, feel free to reach out to me or the Venture team for a chat. We'll see you in the next one.